3 months ago, I learned what betrayal truly sounds like. It isn't shouting or crying, it's laughter through a phone speaker. That hollow laugh is burned into me. The sound of everything I believed about family falling apart. My name's Lauren Hale. I'm 25, and I've spent most of my life keeping everyone else together. I work at a small accounting office in Knoxville, Tennessee, where the air smells like coffee and paper, and the same flickering light hums above my cubicle every day. Every dollar I earn goes somewhere. My parents' bills, my sister's tuition, groceries they forgot to buy. I always told myself it was just what family does. When my little sister Maya started talking about her 16th birthday, she wanted something big, something unforgettable. So of course, I took it on. I booked a cozy riverside restaurant with fairy lights, picked out her favorite cupcakes, hired a small local band, and spent hours after work designing invitations and decorations. 3 months of effort, $500 from my savings, and all I wanted was for her to walk in smiling. Mom would call me every few days. Remember, Maya hates purple, not pink. Dad texted daily, don't be cheap on the food. She deserves the best. I nodded. I obeyed. I kept going. Maya barely replied to my messages. Cool, whatever. I thought it was just teenage attitude. I didn't care. I just wanted that moment. Her surprise, her gratitude, maybe even a hug. When the night came, the place looked perfect. The string lights glowed, the cupcakes sparkled, and the tables were set with silver napkins folded into little stars. I checked my phone. 6 o'clock, no one. 6:15, still nothing. The band started tuning their guitars. I laughed nervously, pretending everything was fine. I called Maya. No answer. Mom, voicemail. Dad, 3 rings. Then his voice, cheerful and distant. Hey Lauren, he said. In the background, I heard chatter, a woman laughing, and an announcement in French. Where are you guys? My voice cracked. Oh, didn't we mention? He said lightly. We're in Paris. Just wanted to keep you busy while we were gone. Then he laughed. That sound careless, amused, cut deeper than any words could. I stood there, surrounded by empty chairs and untouched food, the music fading behind me. I didn't cry. I couldn't. The silence felt heavy, almost unreal. They hadn't forgotten me. They'd planned this. They'd let me pour months of work and money into something they never intended to show up for. I left the restaurant quietly, the photo album I'd made for Maya still sitting on the table, wrapped in tissue paper. It didn't belong with me anymore. Outside, the air was cold and sharp. I walked home under streetlights that blurred at the edges. For the first time, I didn't feel like the reliable daughter or the responsible sister. I just felt invisible. Back in my apartment, I sat on the couch, the glow from the street filtering through the blinds. I thought about the years I'd spent putting everyone else first. The bills, the birthday plans, the sacrifices. And now, the only thing I could hear was that laugh from Paris. That night, I made a list, like I always do. Pay rent, go to work, send money from Maya's school. Pretend nothing happened. But somewhere between the lines, a question formed. Why am I always the one left behind? A week passed, then my phone started lighting up. 36 missed calls in 1 hour. Mom, Dad, Maya. I didn't answer. The voicemails were frantic, voices overlapping. I just sent one text back. I'm very busy. They had no idea what I'd already decided. That night, a message popped up from my old friend Chloe, someone I hadn't heard from in ages. You deserve better. Lo, there's a photography program in Seattle starting next month. You should apply. Photography, my old dream, the one I'd buried under bills and responsibilities. I opened my laptop, searched for the course, and stared at the photos on the school's website. City lights, rainy streets, portraits of strangers that somehow felt alive. For the first time in years, my chest didn't feel heavy. It felt awake. The tuition was $1,500. I barely had enough, but I didn't care. I registered that night, paid the deposit, and booked a one-way ticket to Seattle. The next morning, I handed in my resignation letter at work. My boss barely looked up. Good luck, he said flatly. That was the moment I realized no one would notice I was gone. Back home, I pulled my old Nikon camera from the closet. The lens was dusty, but when I lifted it, my hands felt steady. Then, I sat down and wrote a letter. Maya, this album is for you. It's the last thing I'll do for you. I've paid your bills, covered your life, and planned your world, but that ends now. I'm leaving for Seattle to start my own. I hope one day you'll understand. I left the letter and album on the kitchen counter, locked the door, and stepped outside. The night didn't feel cold anymore. It felt clean, free. For the first time in years, I wasn't running from anything. I was walking toward something that finally felt like mine. 2 days later, someone started banging on my door. The pounding grew louder, shaking the thin wood of my apartment door. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at it, my heart steady in a way it had never been before. I already knew who it was. "Lauren, open up right now." My mother's voice sliced through the hallway. I took a slow breath, walked over, and turned the handle. They stood there, Mom, Dad, and Maya, faces red and tight with panic, their clothes wrinkled from travel. Maya clutched the photo album I'd left behind like she was holding a piece of evidence. Mom pushed past me first. "How could you do this?" she snapped, her tone sharp and trembling. "You're abandoning us." Dad followed, voice deep, controlled. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you thank us." I leaned against the counter, arms crossed, letting their words bounce off the walls. "I'm not abandoning anyone," I said quietly. "I'm just done paying for your lives while mine disappears." Maya scoffed. "You're so dramatic. You're just jealous because I got to go to Paris." I almost laughed, a soft, humorless sound. "Jealous?" I said. "You think I'd trade my peace for a plane ticket?" Dad's jaw tightened. "You think you can just walk away? You owe us. We raised you." My stomach twisted, not with fear, but disbelief. "You didn't raise me," I said. "I raised myself. And I paid for everything you couldn't be bothered to." Mom's voice cracked. "We've given you so much debt," I cut in. "Guilt, responsibility that was never mine." She blinked fast, like she'd been slapped. Then Dad said the words that made the room spin. "We know you took money from our account." For a second, everything went still. Then the corner of my mouth lifted. "Excuse me." Mom stepped closer, eyes wild. "We called the police. They're coming here." Behind her, Maya crossed her arms, that smug little smirk tugging at her lips. "Guess you're not so innocent, huh?" I didn't even flinch. "Fine," I said. "Then, let's wait for them." An hour later, 2 officers knocked on my door. Mom and Dad stood behind them, proud, like this was some kind of victory. The lead officer, a woman with a calm face and a notebook, asked to hear both sides. I nodded, walked over to my desk, and pulled out a folder I'd prepared days ago. Printouts, receipts, bank statements. I handed it over. "Every expense for Maya's party," I said evenly. "The restaurant deposit, the decorations, her school fees, all from my account, not theirs." The officer skimmed through the pages, eyes narrowing. "These match her records," she said finally. "There's no sign of theft." Dad's expression cracked. Mom opened her mouth to speak, but the officer raised a hand. "You made a false report," she said flatly. "Sort this out privately before you waste more of our time." Then she turned to me and gave a short nod before leaving. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom stepped forward, her voice suddenly soft, almost pleading. "Lauren, honey, we didn't mean to upset you. Let's just talk about this." I shook my head. "There's nothing left to talk about." Dad's voice hardened again. "You're really leaving?" "Yes," I said simply, "for Seattle, in 2 weeks." Maya rolled her eyes. "You'll come crawling back. You always do." I met her stare and smiled faintly. "Not this time." Mom looked at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. Maybe she didn't. I wasn't the obedient daughter who bent under their weight. I was someone new, someone she couldn't control. Dad tried one last time. "We're family," he said quietly, his voice almost human again. "You can't just turn your back on us." I opened the door and stepped aside. "You already turned your backs on me. I'm just catching up." They stood frozen for a second before Mom finally grabbed her purse, muttering something about ungrateful children. Maya followed, clutching the album like it burned. Dad didn't say another word. When the door shut behind them, the click of the lock felt like an ending, not to a fight, but to a chapter of my life I'd been stuck in too long. The next morning, I woke to quiet. No calls, no noise, just peace. I made coffee and watched sunlight stretch across my living room floor. It felt strange, almost foreign, the kind of calm you only notice after chaos leaves. But I knew it wouldn't last. Later that week, I printed copies of a letter I'd written. It wasn't to them, not directly. It was for the rest of the family. My aunts, uncles, cousins, the ones who believed my parents' perfect image. I told them the truth, how I'd planned Maya's party, spent my savings, and how my parents and sister had left for Paris without a word. I left a copy on my parents' dining table and emailed the rest. No emotion, no embellishment, just facts. Then, before leaving my apartment, I sent one last message to Maya's group of friends. the ones who adored her, who believed her every word. You should know, the party never happened. I planned it alone while they were in Paris. Here's what it looked like before I left. I attached a photo of the empty restaurant, the untouched cupcakes, the glowing lights, the vacant chairs. By the time I got back from dropping off boxes at Goodwill, my phone was exploding with notifications, messages, comments, screenshots. I didn't open them. I didn't have to. I knew what was happening. The truth had finally found its way out, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilt, only relief, because this time, I wasn't the one left behind. I was the one walking away. By the next afternoon, my phone was a storm of missed calls and unread messages. Every few minutes, another one flashed across the screen. Mom, Dad, Maya. I let them pile up, their names forming a wall of noise I refused to climb. They'd spent years ignoring my silence. Now it was their turn to sit in it. Word spread fast. My cousins texted in disbelief. My aunt from Texas called to say she'd seen my email and that my parents were humiliated. I didn't reply. It wasn't revenge I wanted. It was truth. I had carried the weight of their choices for years. The bills, the guilt, the expectations, and this was just me putting it down. That night, as the city outside quieted, I packed the last of my things. The apartment looked strange without furniture. Just boxers stacked neatly against the wall, and my camera bag resting by the door. My plane ticket to Seattle was printed and tucked inside my journal. A knock came around 10, softer this time, hesitant. I didn't have to look to know it was her. Lauren, please. Mom's voice cracked through the door. Can we just talk? Just for a minute. I didn't move. The sound of her hand pressing against the wood was almost desperate. You've made your point, she said, her voice trembling. Everyone's talking. Your father's beside himself. You've ruined us. I let out a quiet laugh, one I didn't recognize. I didn't ruin anything, I said through the door. You did that yourselves. Silence. Then the faint sound of her crying. We're still your family, she whispered. You can't just erase us. I leaned my head back against the wall. I'm not erasing anyone. I'm just done pretending I belong to people who never saw me. After a long pause, I heard her footsteps fade down the hall. The elevator doors closed, and just like that, it was over. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. I made one last pot of coffee in the bare kitchen, the smell mixing with the chill of early light. As I poured it into a paper cup, I caught my reflection in the window. Tired, but lighter. I grabbed my suitcase, slung my camera over my shoulder, and left the keys on the counter at the airport. I didn't look back once. The plane lifted through clouds streaked with orange and gold. For the first time in years, my chest didn't ache. It expanded. The hum of the engines drowned out every voice that had ever told me I wasn't enough. Seattle greeted me with drizzle and soft gray skies. My Aunt Renee was waiting near baggage claim, holding a cardboard sign that said, "Welcome, photographer." I laughed, the sound coming out brighter than I expected, and hugged her tight. Her home sat just outside the city, tucked between trees that smelled like rain. That first night, we sat on her porch, the world quiet except for the tap of water on the railing. She handed me a spare key and said, "This is your space now. You don't owe anyone anything here." I didn't know how to respond, so I just said, "Thank you," and meant it. The photography course started 3 days later. Walking into that classroom with my camera slung over my shoulder felt like stepping into another life. The instructor, a lean man with silver hair and tired eyes, talked about light, how it can tell the truth if you let it. I took notes like every word mattered. Each day, I walked the city after class, snapping photos of neon signs reflected in puddles, strangers waiting at crosswalks, the skyline melting into mist. I didn't think about the past, not really, but sometimes, when I caught someone's expression in my lens, that quiet mix of hope and hurt, I saw pieces of myself. 2 weeks in, I received one last email from home. The subject line read, "We miss you." I didn't open it. I didn't delete it either. It just stayed there. A ghost reminder that some things don't need closure to end. By the time our first gallery showcase came around, I had a wall of my own, black and white prints of city corners, reflections, and fleeting smiles. People stopped to look. They lingered. A man in a suit said my work felt honest. That was all I ever wanted it to be. When the night ended, my instructor came over, smiling. "You've got a good eye," he said. "But more than that, you've got perspective. That's rarer than talent." Walking home in the drizzle, his words replayed in my head. Perspective. The thing I'd spent years giving away was finally mine again. I didn't think much about Maya or my parents anymore. From what I heard through distant relatives, the fallout was ugly. Mom stopped showing up to her book club. Dad lost a few friends. Maya's social circle had crumbled after the truth came out. But that wasn't my problem anymore. Their world was built on appearances. Mine was built on light. One evening, while editing photos at a cafe, a girl about Maya's age sat near me, sketching quietly. She looked up and smiled shyly. "I like your camera," she said. "You look like you really love what you do." I smiled back. "I do. Took me a while to get here though." She nodded. "Worth it." I looked out the window, the city lights reflecting off wet pavement, the kind of scene I'd dreamed of capturing years ago. "Yeah," I said softly. Every second, that night, as I walked home through the misty streets, I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the noise, the silence that followed. None of it disappeared, but it no longer defined me. Because healing isn't about forgetting what broke you. It's about choosing what comes next. And for the first time in my life, what came next was entirely mine.